What does faith look like when there's no miracle? Just responsibility, love, and showing up again tomorrow. Today's conversation isn't about success or spotlight. It's about caregiving, perseverance, and trusting God when the seasons of life grow harder instead of clearer. This is a story about loving faithfully, even when the road doesn't straighten out. Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode will have honest conversations with people who've walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by Gordon Druvenga. Gordon has spent decades serving behind the scenes in Christian ministry and media, including leadership roles with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and producing multiple faith-based films. Today, he serves as CFO and treasurer of the Patterns of Evidence Foundation, supporting projects that explore the historical reliability of Scripture. But the story we're sharing today isn't about titles or achievements. It's about what faith looks like when your wife lives with dementia, and when your family has walked through trials like addiction, and when loving well means staying present in seasons that you cannot control or fix. Gordy, thank you so much for being with us today here on Unmasked and being willing to share your story and trust us with it.
Thanks a lot, Wes. Fun. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure and honor to have you with us. So before we get into your background and faith and all that stuff, walk us through what a typical day looks like for you as a husband, a caregiver, and a man of faith in this season of your life.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say, talk about a typical day because it's kind of like a typical week for what we have. But I'm a caregiver for my wife with dementia. And so my day is pretty much wrapped around that. Uh, for example, well, I'll just talk a little bit about tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a caregiver coming for 4 hours, and that'll give me a chance to get my hair cut and work on some estate planning things we're working on. Most days we try to get a walk in at the health club that's like 2 blocks away, which is nice, and to try to keep her involved as much as possible. And we're involved in church stuff as much as we can.
So how do you balance your caregiving with your faith, and how does that all kind of wrap up together?
It's it's a constant battle of uh, working the schedule. Really, I mean, it's the opposite of what you dream about for retirement, because your dream is that you won't have to keep a calendar, and you won't have to have any time requirements. But now instead, it's like there's pills to take, and there's meals to prepare, and there's helping her get dressed and getting baths and all that kind of stuff, which has to fit into the day, along with other things like, having a quiet time and spending time with the Lord, and uh, getting some exercise, and hopefully doing some fun things and getting out to dinner sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're like me, cooking was not on your high priority list, and you probably had to kind of learn as you go. Because knowing you and Cindy, I have a feeling she probably did a lot of the cooking for a while.
Yeah, for 42 years, she did 99% of it. And it was, uh, what do I say? I wondered as I approached retirement, I kind of wondered, I wonder if I'll take over, maybe I'll do a few days a week or something like that and help cook. And it was kind of an interesting thing to me. But then of course I was pressed into the job, but she left me with a absolutely fabulous recipe book because she was always very what do I say, meticulous with stuff and organized. And so I've got this great 3-ring binder that I can use for recipes. So it's pretty good that way.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how has caring for your wife through dementia reshaped your understanding of love and commitment?
Yeah. Wow. Well, we took a vow back in the day, and we said, till death do us part. And we said, in sickness and in health. And, when we're young, we don't really think about the ramifications of that because everything's fine and we've never been sick. So it, it doesn't seem to matter. But all of a sudden now here it is. And it's like, well, I made that vow. And so that's the commitment part, is that, you know, I it's I made the vow, I need to follow through. And at the same time, then there's the reality that there's a there's a bigger purpose going on, and God is training us. I've heard it spoken that everything in this life is just a training program for what's going to happen, in eternity. And so God has a purpose, and we often can't see that purpose in the middle of the story. And we see that in Bible stories as we read through, say, the book of Esther. My wife and I have been going through, and in the middle of the story, you don't see where it's going to end. And that's where we are now, is we're in the middle of the story, and so there will be an ending, but we don't know for sure what that's going to be.
Yeah, you get to live your own story, your own wait for your own cliffhanger, so to speak.
That's right.
So, as you think about your life right now, and you think about all of the things that you've been going through, and your faith and everything, what has this season required of you spiritually that earlier seasons didn't?
Yeah, I really think it's a matter of a deeper level of trusting God. Back when my daughter was an addict, there was a day I loved taking Sunday afternoon walks, prayer walks, and walk through the neighborhood and pray to the Lord. And I was walking through my neighborhood taking a corner, and I heard God say to me, "What does it mean to trust me?" And this was way back like 2010. And it kind of caught my attention, and I looked up, and there at the next house was a big boat on a trailer. And I thought of a book I had just read about, if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. And that whole concept of trusting God. And that was with my daughter in addiction. Now, with dealing with dementia and the daily caregiving, it becomes more of a day by day trusting and saying, okay, God's got this, and He'll walk me through each day, um, whatever comes.
I can definitely see how it would require a new level of trust each and
Yeah,
every day, because you never know what the day is going to hold getting up,
very
and
true.
really even by moment.
Yeah, very true.
You've spent a lot of your life helping ministries steward resources wisely. How do you steward hope in a situation like this when outcome is so uncertain?
Mm. Well, that's a great question. Stewarding hope. It's an interesting perspective, but I think I think it's really a matter of we need to change our perspective because it's easy to get drugged down if we're just looking at the troubles that we're facing each day. But there's hope in both the macro and the micro. The macro is that we know the outcome is actually certain. I mean, the book of Revelations is written, there will be a day when he will, the Lord, will wipe every tear from our eyes. And so from that perspective, the outcome is certain. And of course there is hope. And then in the micro, it's important to just look at the daily wins. Don't look at the problems, but what are the daily wins? Like last night, I took my wife to a prayer meeting, and like always, you never know how that's going to go. But it got to a point where she started talking, and it was kind of babbling. I mean, she struggles with her ability to talk right now. And it just started out with babbling. And at first, I'm kind of embarrassed. And then she got it together and said, "Help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus." That was her prayer. I mean, to me, that was sweet. And so that's a daily win. And we need to take those as precious moments.
Yeah, I mean, I can see knowing you and knowing you as a couple. We've had many conversations, and what is it like for you to have to live moment by moment and realize, hey, I had this planned for today, and now because of this or that, I'm not going to be able to do that. Talk to me about that mindset and that um the flexibility that you have to be able to go through days with really no set schedule as much as you want one.
Yeah, yeah. It's really a matter of I set the schedule and I have a plan, and as long as things go well, we do those things. But there are times where Cindy gets tired and has to go down for a nap or something like that. And if there's a meeting planned or something else, my general default is let the nap happen. And then I just have to cancel that meeting. Surprising to me how often that doesn't happen, that everything seems fine. I mean, we've been working on getting her more healthy in several areas and doing some treatments that have been good for her. And so attitude wise, it's been pretty good. And so and she has always been a people person. So most of the time we can proceed with the schedule, but there are times and I always have to be open to when things do turn to just plain cancel.
Sure. One of the things you said earlier, and I alluded to it in my introduction for you, is that you also have walked through seasons of addiction with your daughter. Can you kind of walk us through kind of how that all came to be from your perspective, and just some of those early thoughts and feelings that you had as a dad when you found out what was going on?
Yeah, it was a progression, and for us it actually started with our daughter's older brother, our firstborn, that had trouble when he got teased on the school bus. And it was actually, when I look at the calendar, as I turn the calendar, that was 30 years ago when he got teased in the school bus, and things went south for him, and we struggled with him. And then our whole focus was on trying to keep him upright and going to school and all that, and kind of forgetting about the next in line, which was Amy, our daughter. And so then when she got to middle school, we were told by church, the leaders at church, that they found her that she had been cutting. And so that started a whole process. We tried to get some counseling. We tried to work with her. Uh, when she went to college, she went off to Chicago, and there's a lot you can find in the big city that are problems. And so she found some problematic friends, and before long, that went south. Within 1 year, she was back at our house, and we didn't know what was gonna be next. Um, but then the day came when she drank herself to a .39 blood alcohol level and nearly died, and by then, as she was in the hospital, we knew we were now dealing with addiction. And, it just went from there. We fought for her, we tried to help her get clean, but it went off the rails after treatment and everything. It went off the rails, and she ended up homeless in Seattle as a drug addict, and we didn't know for 18 months if she was alive or dead. And then when she did finally call us, it was when the doctors had told her that she was going to die and she needed to notify next of kin. So it was quite a progression there over several years.
Walking with a child through addiction is not something that I think any parent ever wants to go through. It can feel isolating and among a number of other things. What did that season reveal to you about fear and faith and even surrender for both you and Cindy?
Yeah, that's another good question. Yeah, it's really a matter of turning that fear toward faith and surrender. And time again in scripture, we hear God say, "Do not fear." And uh, that gets tested. I mean, when she drank herself nearly to death, I mean, that was totally tested. That night was uh, one of the worst nights we could we could ever dream of. Um, when we didn't know if she was alive or dead. I mean, it was that nagging fear of waiting for the phone call. It would be bad news. Um, the surrender after she did call us when she was supposedly dying. I mean, she's still alive today, and she's been clean since 2018. So I thank the Lord for that. And we got friends who don't have that good a story because their loved one died. So I know that's pretty common. Um, but when she did call us, uh, I had a prayer retreat planned at a place called Potchman Terrace, which is a Catholic retreat center up in Minnesota. And as part of that, I asked the staff for prayer, and a lady that was on staff came and prayed with me. And I mean, my verse at that time was Mark 5:23, where Jairus says, "My little daughter's at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her that she may get well and live." And that was exactly my situation. And that was one of those prayer times as we sat in the chapel that to me was the most profound. God, it was like God showed up. And I can't say that I knew Amy was going to come out okay, but I knew that God was going to carry us through. And that's where I think what we've seen in a lot of those crises, we've seen God remind us, I've got this.
You know, as a dad myself, I can't imagine living with this thought of, is my daughter even alive? You know, I haven't heard from her in months. You know, what's going on? To all of a sudden having that phone call where she's on the other end, and now you have this sudden feeling of she's alive. I'm hearing her voice, but then at the same time, she's calling to tell you that I'm in the hospital and the doctors say I'm not going to make it. Talk about a competing amount of emotions there, right? Because now you're the relief that she's alive and she's calling you, but she's calling to tell you that she's not going to make it. What do you remember from that period when those feelings were kind of at battle and at war within each other, within you?
Yeah, it was like, I think it was about November 6th when we got the call. And I had that prayer retreat like the very next weekend, and we started a process of calling and talking to her every day. And even though there was plenty of tension from our past relationship issues, uh, it seemed, I mean, it seemed to be going well. So we continued to talk to her every day. And then it was like, uh, Thanksgiving was coming up, and she asked, could we come out to visit over Thanksgiving? And so we booked tickets. And then on the Wednesday before we flew, her heart stopped, and they had to resuscitate her and have her in, um, I'm losing the word, but in the, to fix her up for a couple of days, urgent care. And so by the time we flew out there, it was like the 20th of November, and Thanksgiving was the next Thursday, and we didn't really know what to expect. So we went to the hospital, and one of us at a time went and spent some time with her. And what we found was it was above and beyond all of our expectations, as far as we were able to largely mend the relationship, find some forgiveness, and at least establish that. I mean, there weren't any big discussions about what's the next step and are you going to get clean and all those kind of things. It's like, this was, we didn't know how long we had. So there were uh, a lot of unknown moments, but yet God really worked through it during that time, even to the point of just really speaking to us through the church we attended. We were at a friend's house and we went to their church, and that worship time, I mean, God just worked through that, and so he throughout the process uh reminded us of his care.
I love that you brought up um, the fact that you didn't have conversations around, are you going to get clean or anything along those lines? Because as a parent, we want to do what's best for our child, and we kind of want to hit them over the head and make them do what they need to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
why don't you see this? But that's not always the right step. As somebody, I'm very active in Celebrate Recovery. I know you're familiar with the ministry through conversations we've had. Um, but I'm very active, and one of the things that you hear time and time again is somebody's not going to be able to get clean or won't get clean if it's not what they want, right? You can try and force them all day, every day, but it's not going to stick. And so how did you learn to love your daughter through everything that was going on without trying to control the outcome?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I had heard that comment even before going to a Celebrate Recovery. I had heard that comment from a fella at church in Minnesota that had himself been on the, had been addicted. He and his wife had both, and then they've recovered and had a good story. But he shared that about with all the research. It doesn't matter how many times you go into treatment, it's making the decision to stop. And so, yeah, we were, knowing that, and my tendency is to be a controller. Okay, so and our daughter is pretty strong-willed, and so I learned in her teen years that uh, fighting that battle nose to nose was not going to be the way the way to make things happen. And so um, it was a process. I mean, definitely, definitely a process of um, letting. And we all face that as our kids become adults. How do you deal with them now? They used to be your child, and you were in control of them, and obviously you do exercise a lot of control at that point. When they're adults and they're making bad decisions, that's the test. And we learned with our firstborn, our first son, that it doesn't matter what decisions they're making. If they're bad decisions, we still want to show them love, and because we want to be there on the backside. And doesn't the Lord do that for us? I mean, He's always there. He lets us make the bad decisions, and then He's there for us when we want to come back.
Yeah, that's good. Well, real quick here, I just want to pause for just a moment and talk to the listeners out there. If you're listening to this podcast and we've covered a lot of ground already and had some Gordy's given us some real nuggets of wisdom here. So if something in this first part of the episode that has already spoken to you, would you take a moment and share it with somebody else that you think needs to hear it? You really don't know whose breakthrough might happen because of a simple message from you. And that's how conversations get started, is just with a simple message that says, hey, what did you think about this? So take a moment and share it right now and help somebody else get the wisdom that you're hearing today. So Gordy, let's get back into it here just a little bit. And, many people associate faithfulness with visible fruit, right? So what does faithfulness look like when the fruit is simply staying?
Yeah, and I think when you mean that, it's just staying by holding firm. Is that right?
Yeah.
Um, just hanging in there. Um, you know, uh, I was able to collaborate with in a book writing thing and wrote a chapter on some of my story, and I know you have also, Wes, wrote a book that really got me thinking about how I might structure my book. But I think resilience is really the key. And how do we establish resilience? That's kind of what I want to really explore. And the title of my book may be something like "Calming the Storm Within." When there's a storm outside, how do we calm the storm on the inside? But there's a comment we hear in Celebrate Recovery almost every week, one day at a time. I laugh because they love doing acrostics with all their teaching, and every time they come up to an O, it's one day at a time. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it is an absolute theme of one day at a time, and I think that's really a key of not not getting ahead of ourselves. And, Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. I mean, and I'm a planner, so I really struggle with that one. But that's what he said. We take it one day at a time. And if we do that, we can keep moving, and we can avoid the pitfalls.
Yeah, it's really hard to live one day at a time when you, especially in modern days, when you have a calendar, right? And everyone's like, "Hey, what are you doing on?" And so now you before you know it, you have a calendar full of things, but yet you're still trying to live one day at a time, right? You can't control what happened yesterday. You can't control what happens tomorrow. You can only control what happens to you today. And even then, you have limited ability to control it. And so, what does it look like, and how do you live one day at a time?
Well, it's good. I mean, I've always considered myself the master of the 5-year plan. I mean, back in the business world, that's what I would do, is write 5-year plans for people. And when it comes down to it, it's all in your assumptions, and you've got a lot of assumptions when you're reaching out 5 years. And in today's world, it's nearly impossible. But how to do the one day at a time? I think we have to focus on the small daily miracles that happen, and look for God to be at work in our lives. And I think God gives us a sunrise and a sunset every day for a reason, to just remind us that He's here. And I've got a sunset going right outside my window right now. But I think that's a great reminder, and to look for those reminders of uh, that the God is walking with us.
So, when you think about your relationship with Cindy and everything going on in your life now, and you think about the losses that you've had over the years, of time missed with daughter, or time missed with son, or whatever it might be, right? There's just a lot of loss there in many different ways. How do you grieve losses that not only have happened but are maybe still ongoing, without um any sense of clear closure?
Yeah, well, I'm thankful that with my kids, I've got a good relationship with all of them. And so we don't spend a lot of time talking about the past and past failures or anything like that. We just enjoy our current relationship. But the toughest part of dementia is the fact that the caregiver, it was, uh, I've heard it said that uh, Alzheimer's is the worst disease and the victim is the caregiver. And uh, the challenge you have as a caregiver is that you have to grieve a little bit every day, as your person with dementia loses uh, factors in their brain. We grieve that. I mean, my wife used to be a teacher, uh, and then she was a Spanish translator, and she was very good with Spanish. And she's lost it to the point now where my Spanish is better than hers, which that's a pretty significant loss. But grieving those things a little at a time is, in a way, it's like turning the knife. It's a slow process, and it's something that we need help to get through. And one of the things that's really one of the best decisions I made in 2025 was joining a support group for caregivers. Because we have a group of people, and some they're in all the different stages. And when we talk about our challenges, it's like, oh yeah, that's mine too. And we see that we're all kind of in the same boat. And just knowing that other people are dealing with those things really helps, and we can encourage each other.
I love that you have a community like that. One of the things that I talk about on this podcast quite often is just the importance of community in your life, right? It's really hard to get through life change by yourself. You need people in your corner to encourage you, to cheer you on, to let you know that you're not alone. And so, what role has this community played in you? You kind of alluded to it here a second ago, but what role has the community played in your life, really, in sustaining you when at times it can be really easy to feel like you're alone?
Hmm. Yeah, and I would agree with you that this is an absolutely critical piece that we all need, because getting through these kind of crises on your own is tremendously difficult. For us, we've had church friends. We moved 2 years ago from Minnesota to Iowa, but we've got church friends on both ends. And at our church here, since moving, they have um, a team that reaches out to people in need, people with health issues and stuff like that. And they'll come and spend time with my wife and give me a break sometimes. And they're always wanting to help out, and so that's really good. We have friends in both states that reach out and help us, um, and that's been wonderful. We have the Celebrate Recovery, and we have that in both states because we have a home Celebrate Recovery in Minnesota where we really cut our teeth in the whole recovery world, and we have the one here that the being in a men's group for me is really a blessing because I can bare my soul and we can really be honest with each other, which is pretty rare. And here at we're living in a retirement community here, which is really helpful because there's a lot of dementia resources right on campus, and that gives us the ability to call on help when we need it. So that's all part of the package. And I say to my wife a lot, we've got great friends, and we just, it's really helpful. So what I'd say to anybody is build a base. If things aren't bad right now, still build a base, because that day may come when you have to draw on your friends. So
Yeah, I think of it like a bank account. You have to build your savings account out before you can draw from it. And
absolutely,
so the
absolutely.
more friends you can have and the more solid those friendships are, the more value they have to be able to pull from in the future when you need it. So you've lived a long obedience to God. What would you say to somebody who's out there and they said, you know what, I'm just exhausted, and they're wondering if faithfulness is even worth it?
Yeah. Um, Again, that's a terrific question, and I can understand that, uh, because I know people are there. But I would just say that uh, God is sufficient, that He can handle whatever crisis you're going through, and He actually wants to handle it. And so, if we hand it over to Him, He will take it, and there will be a joy with that. That's uh, kind of like in Scripture, it talks about the peace that passes understanding. when we turn those things over to the Lord.
Well said. If you could speak to your younger self before caregiving, before addiction touched your family, before any of that, what would you want him to understand about God?
That I would say it's that his hands are bigger than my hands. Because to go back 30 years to before any of this happened, we were on a path toward having what we'd call a perfect family. Okay, and that was kind of my dream, and I was going to be in control, and my kids were going to be, the ones who sit in the front row in church and fold their hands, and are perfect and all that. That was kind of my dream, and it was kind of happening until 30 years ago. And the thing is, I'm naturally a controller, like I said, and so what I really would say to myself is God's hands are bigger. So give it to God and let him take it where he wants to take it, and trust him with the results.
It's easier said than done when you're a
That's for sure.
controller.
That's for sure. I want to grip everything and I got to open up. Yeah.
When you look back over your life, where have you met most, or when you look back over your life, where have you most clearly seen God's presence? Not in resolution, but in endurance.
Mm. Well, God's presence. Um, I think it's in those daily victories that happen. And when God lets me know that he's in control. It's like during the 18 months that our daughter was in Seattle and we didn't know if she was alive or dead, we would get these random emails from people who would say, I'm a friend of your daughter and I just want you to know that she's alive. And I was like, we didn't even know those people. And there it was, a little breadcrumb that's telling us, okay, God's still at work. We've kind of seen those along the way. Um, our third child was actually a miracle child because we had been told that we couldn't have more kids, and he showed up after we had adopted our daughter. And so things like that have happened through time that, uh, to me, that's God saying, okay, I've got this.
One of the things that I love to do is to give listeners the ability to find my guests online, because a lot of times they share something that really just speaks to them. If somebody is out there and they're like, man, Gordy, or you've shared something today and I want to find out more, or you mentioned the book that you helped write, where can they find you online, and what is the name of the book that you helped write, and where
Ooh,
can they find that?
yeah, the book is available on Amazon. It's called Grace Through the Storm: Faith-Filled Journeys of Healing and Strength, and it's myself and 9 other people who wrote stories about their storm and how they made it through the storm. And so there's a lot of good things there. That's available on Amazon. And you can look for me on Facebook or on X, and I'll be there. So
Perfect. Well, if you want a copy of the book that he helped write, I'll leave a link to that down in the show notes, as well as links to him on social media. If you want to connect that way, he'll send them over to me, and I'll make sure to get those included. Well, Gordy, two last questions for you. For somebody that's listening who is quietly carrying something heavy, whether it be illness or family brokenness or long-term grief, what would you want them to know about God in those seasons?
God is a God who sees. And so he sees your situation. He knows what you're struggling with. And like I said earlier, his hands are bigger than your hands. He can take it. So I'd encourage anyone to lean on him, give it over to the Lord, and find that trust.
So the last question for you. Let's just say there's somebody out there and they're like, okay, I know that I need to change something, but they're not quite sure what to do. They're not quite sure what that first step should be. If you had to leave them with one piece of advice, one step to take to begin to change or turn something over to God, what piece of advice, what step would you leave that person?
If you're not sure what that step is, you need to find somebody that can guide you. And that might be a pastor, that might be a counselor, it might be a friend. But reach out. You need to lay out the issue and have somebody help you out. And like you've said, Wes, at Celebrate Recovery, you can show up and they have confidential group meetings where any issues can be laid on the table, and we can find recovery.
Absolutely. Well, Gordy, thank you so much again for joining us here today on Unmasked.
Well, thank you very much. This has been fun, and I appreciate the hard questions.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Well, thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. And again, a huge thanks to Gordy for being so open and honest with us today here on Unmasked. If something in this episode spoke to you, don't let it stop with you. Share it with the one person that God put on your heart while you were listening. You never know where the breakthrough might start with just a simple message from you. If you want more encouragement or want to speak to me one-on-one, or if you're interested in having me speak at your church or event, you can find everything at wesleyfarnsworth.com. And make sure you join the Unmasked community by connecting with me on social media so that we can walk through this journey together. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and freedom begins the moment that you choose to live unmasked. God bless you.